There comes a moment in every person's life when excuses stop making sense, when the stories we tell ourselves about why things are the way they are begin to crumble. That moment is not comfortable, not inspiring, and certainly not pleasant, but it is necessary because nothing changes until you've had enough. Think about it. We often wait for motivation to arrive, for inspiration to knock, for circumstances to improve. We convince ourselves that one day, when the time is right, we'll take that leap, start that business, quit that bad habit, or fix that relationship. But change doesn't work that way. Change doesn't come wrapped in comfort. It comes wrapped in frustration, exhaustion, and a deep realization that you can't keep living the same story anymore. When you've had enough, something shifts inside you. It's not anger. It's awakening. It's when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the fear of change. That's the tipping point where transformation begins. Take any person who's truly changed their life, financially, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and you'll find the same pattern. It wasn't a random day of inspiration that changed them. It was the day they looked in the mirror and said, I'm done. Done settling, done blaming, done pretending. That's when action begins. Not perfect action, not confident action, but real action. And that's the only kind that matters. We often underestimate how powerful emotional thresholds are. You can read every book, attend every seminar, and repeat every affirmation, but until you reach that point of internal truth, where you can't stand your own excuses anymore, nothing shifts. That's not weakness, that's clarity. Because clarity comes after discomfort. The truth is, human beings don't grow from comfort, we grow from tension. The moment you've had enough is the moment you stop negotiating with your limitations. You stop saying, I'll try, and start saying, I must. It's not about pushing harder, it's about deciding differently. Think of history's great breakthroughs. They didn't happen because someone wanted change, they happened because someone needed it. Because someone refused to tolerate the old system, the old pattern, the old belief any longer. That's the power of enough. If you want to transform your life, stop asking, when will things change? And start asking, when will I decide I've had enough of this version of me? Because the moment you decide that, you begin to move. You may not know how, you may not have all the answers, but the decision itself creates momentum. Every new chapter in your life begins the moment you stop rereading the old one. When you've had enough of delay, enough of fear, enough of average, that's when real progress begins. So if you're feeling stuck right now, maybe it's not a lack of resources or opportunities. Maybe you just haven't had enough yet. But when you do, when the weight of staying still becomes too heavy, you'll move. And once you do, everything changes. Because you change first. 5 keynotes of the speech: change begins at the threshold of discomfort. Real transformation doesn't start with inspiration. It starts when the pain of inaction outweighs the comfort of familiarity. Decisions are stronger than motivation. Progress doesn't come from waiting to feel ready. It comes from deciding that enough is enough. A clarity follows frustration. When you've had enough of your own excuses, you gain a new level of clarity that drives meaningful action. Action matters more than perfection. Once you cross that emotional threshold, imperfect steps forward become more valuable than perfectly planned intentions. You change first, then your world follows. External change begins only after an internal shift. Once your mindset evolves, your circumstances eventually reflect it. Change begins at the threshold of discomfort. That single truth explains why so many people stay the same for so long, even when they say they want to change. Most people are not lazy or unmotivated. They are simply comfortable enough to tolerate what doesn't fulfill them. Comfort is deceptive. It feels safe, predictable, and familiar even when it's quietly draining us. We learn to live inside the boundaries of what's bearable, not realizing that growth lives outside of it. Real transformation begins only when comfort stops feeling like peace and starts feeling like a cage. Discomfort is the birthplace of awareness. It's that uneasy feeling in your chest when you know you're capable of more, but keep repeating the same patterns. It's the quiet frustration that builds up when your life looks fine on the outside, but deep down you feel stuck. That discomfort isn't punishment. It's feedback. It's your potential knocking, asking to be recognized. The challenge is that most people numb it. They distract themselves with entertainment, business, or comparison to avoid listening to that inner voice saying, this isn't who I want to be. But the longer you ignore discomfort, the louder it gets. Eventually, it turns into restlessness, anxiety, or burnout, all signals pushing you toward change. We often misunderstand the role of discomfort. We think of it as a sign something's wrong, when in reality, it's proof something's waking up. Imagine a seed pushing through the soil. That moment isn't comfortable, it's dark, tight, and uncertain. But without that tension, there's no growth. Humans are no different. Growth requires friction. The friction between who you are and who you could be. When you feel that tension, you're standing at the edge of transformation. The question is whether you'll step forward or retreat. Many people say they want change, but few are willing to face discomfort. That's why so many goals fade into maybe next year or when things calm down. Yet, the truth is there's never a perfect moment to begin. The only real moment of change is when you decide that staying the same hurts too much. You can't evolve in comfort, you can only decorate it. Comfort can give you temporary happiness, but it will never give you meaning. Meaning is born from struggle, from confronting the parts of yourself that you've been avoiding, Discomfort also has a strange way of clarifying priorities. When you're pushed to your limits, you learn what actually matters. You stop caring about superficial approval and start caring about alignment. You stop chasing validation and start seeking purpose. That's why people who have been through pain often emerge wiser. They've seen what comfort hides. They've learned that ease without purpose is emptiness, and struggle with direction is growth. Consider how many breakthroughs in history began with discomfort. Social movements began because someone was no longer comfortable with injustice. Inventions were born because someone was no longer comfortable with limitations. Personal transformations began because someone was no longer comfortable with mediocrity. Discomfort is not the enemy of success, it's the spark that lights it. The key is to see it not as a signal to retreat, but as a signal to rise. Every time you face discomfort, you are given a choice to shrink or stretch. Shrinking feels safer in the moment, but it slowly erodes your confidence. Stretching feels painful at first, but expands your possibilities. The more you choose to stretch, the more resilient you become. Eventually, the discomfort that once scared you becomes the fuel that empowers you. You start realizing that discomfort isn't there to break you, it's there to build you. If you study people who achieve meaningful change, you'll notice they all share one common trait. They stopped fearing discomfort. They welcomed it. They understood that the pain of growth is temporary, but the pain of regret lasts forever. They used their discomfort as direction, as a compass pointing them toward what needs to change. They didn't run from it, they learned from it. That's how discomfort transforms from suffering into strength. So when you find yourself at that threshold, the point where comfort feels suffocating and discomfort feels terrifying, remember that this is where transformation begins. It's not supposed to feel easy, it's supposed to feel necessary. That tension you feel is the gap between your potential and your reality. And the only way to close that gap is to move through it, not around it. Growth doesn't begin when you feel ready, it begins when you finally have the courage to face discomfort and say, I'm not staying here anymore. Because in that moment, you stop surviving your life and start creating it. Decisions are stronger than motivation. Motivation is fleeting. It rises and falls like a wave. Some days you wake up inspired, ready to take on the world, and other days you can barely find the energy to care. That's the problem with depending on motivation. It's emotional, and emotions are temporary. Decisions, on the other hand, are commitments. They don't depend on how you feel in the moment. They are grounded in who you decide to become, not in what mood you're in today. A decision has power because it represents a line drawn in the sand. A point where you tell yourself, this is who I am now, and there's no going back. When you look at people who've achieved meaningful change, you'll notice that their journey rarely started with excitement. It started with a decision to stop settling, a decision to do what's necessary, not what's convenient, a decision to act even when the feelings didn't match. Because motivation asks, do I feel like it today? But a decision says, I'll do it anyway. That single shift changes everything. The most disciplined, successful, fulfilled people are not those who always feel inspired. They're the ones who act from commitment, not emotion. The difference between a wish and a decision is action. You can wish for a better body, a stronger career, a healthier relationship, but until you decide that it must happen, it remains a dream. A decision brings energy with it. It changes your posture, your language, your thinking. When you decide, you stop negotiating with yourself. You stop saying maybe and start saying must. And that shift from indecision to certainty activates something powerful inside you, a sense of purpose that no amount of external motivation can replace. Many people wait for the right mood to start, but the truth is the mood comes after movement. When you act on a decision, even when you don't feel like it, you build momentum. That momentum creates results, and results build belief. Over time, that belief fuels genuine motivation. So ironically, the thing most people wait for, motivation, is actually created by the very decision they avoid making. Every major transformation begins not with feeling ready, but with deciding that being ready is no longer a requirement. Think about how most habits are formed. It's not because someone felt inspired every day to exercise, study, or build their craft. It's because they decided that consistency mattered more than convenience. They turned daily choices into non-negotiables. They didn't wait for motivation. They made a decision that removed the option to quit. That's the quiet strength behind real change. A decision made once and honored repeatedly becomes character. A true decision simplifies your life. It removes the noise of doubt and distraction. It gives your mind direction. Like setting a compass. Before deciding, everything feels uncertain. You keep questioning yourself, second guessing your goals, looking for signs. After deciding, your energy stops scattering. You stop asking, should I? And start asking, how can I? That single word shift from should to how changes your focus from hesitation to action. It's the mental clarity that turns ordinary people to extraordinary achievers. The danger of relying on motivation is that it makes you a prisoner of your emotions. When you feel good, you move forward. When you feel tired, you stop. But life doesn't wait for your emotions to align. It rewards those who act with discipline, not those who act only when they feel like it. A decision anchors you when motivation fades. It keeps you grounded in your why when your how gets hard. That's why people who make firm decisions tend to outlast those who rely on bursts of motivation, because discipline doesn't expire when emotions do. Deciding isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. It happens in an ordinary moment when you realize you're done making excuses. You simply choose to start to change, to continue. That quiet moment of choice carries more power than 1,000 motivational speeches because it's yours. It comes from conviction, not from external influence. Motivation might inspire you to begin, but only decision will help you stay. Every major shift in life starts with one decisive moment, a moment when you choose to stop living by impulse and start living by intention. That's when everything inside you aligns toward a single purpose. You start showing up differently, thinking differently, and prioritizing differently. That's the strength of decision. It doesn't wait for confidence, it creates it. It doesn't rely on feelings, it defines them. Motivation fades, but decisions last. When you decide with clarity and commitment, you build a foundation that emotions can't shake. You start realizing that the gap between who you are and who you want to be isn't filled with inspiration. It's filled with decisions made one after another, even when you're tired, scared, or unsure. Because every time you choose discipline over comfort, you prove to yourself that you're capable of more. That proof compounds. And before long, what once required motivation becomes your new normal. That's the quiet power of decision. It turns what used to be a struggle into a standard. Clarity follows frustration. Most people think clarity comes from calm reflection, quiet moments, or careful planning, but in reality, it often comes after chaos. It comes after the repeated cycle of trying, failing, and feeling stuck. It arrives not in the beginning of the journey, but somewhere in the middle when you've had enough of your own confusion and indecision. Frustration is not a sign that you're lost. It's a signal that you're getting closer to the truth. Because only when the old patterns stop working do you begin to search deeply for what truly matters. Frustration is the emotional friction between who you are and who you're trying to become. It's that uneasy tension when you keep doing the same things but no longer get the same satisfaction. You feel restless, irritated, and drained, not because you're weak, but because your potential is demanding an upgrade. The human mind resists change until it becomes too uncomfortable to stay the same. That discomfort builds pressure, and that pressure forces you to think differently. It makes you question your choices, your environment, your habits. That's when clarity begins to form, not in comfort. But in contrast, we rarely realize that frustration is feedback. It's life's way of saying, this isn't working anymore. But instead of listening, we often fight it. We complain about feeling stuck, hoping that motivation will return and fix things. Yet frustration doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're learning. It means your standards are rising. It's the mental and emotional tension that occurs when your old ways of thinking can no longer carry your new level of awareness. You're outgrowing your comfort zone, and the growing pains are the proof. Think about the moments when you've made your biggest life decisions. Changing careers, ending toxic habits, walking away from unfulfilling environments. Those decisions didn't come from perfect peace, they came from prolonged frustration. You reached a point where pretending everything was fine became impossible. That emotional exhaustion forced clarity. You started to see the difference between what you want and what you've been tolerating. That's the power of frustration. It strips away illusions and exposes truth. In a world that glorifies constant positivity, we're taught to avoid frustration. We see it as failure, as weakness, as something to suppress. But avoiding frustration is like ignoring a warning light on your dashboard. It doesn't solve the problem, it delays the solution. When you allow yourself to feel frustration and examine it, you start discovering what it's trying to teach you. Maybe it's telling you that you're misaligned with your values. Maybe it's revealing that you've outgrown your current situation. Or maybe it's reminding you that progress requires a new approach. Every time you face frustration honestly, you collect a piece of clarity. The truth is, clarity is not an instant revelation, it's a process of elimination. You get clearer about what you want by experiencing what you don't. Every failed attempt, every disappointment, every wrong turn removes a layer of confusion. It's like sculpting. You don't create clarity by adding more, you create it by chipping away what doesn't belong. Frustration is the sculptor's tool. It's uncomfortable, but it shapes you into someone more focused and self-aware. When frustration builds up, most people look for escape routes. They distract themselves with business, entertainment, or other people's validation. But the ones who grow are those who sit with their frustration long enough to understand it. They ask themselves difficult questions. Why am I feeling stuck? What am I avoiding? What needs to change? That level of honesty turns frustration into transformation. Because the moment you stop blaming your circumstances and start learning from them, clarity follows naturally. Clarity also requires emotional maturity, the willingness to admit that not everything can stay the same. Sometimes, the clarity you gain will demand letting go of old goals, relationships, or identities that no longer fit your future. That's why it often feels painful before it feels peaceful. You have to dismantle the old structure before you can build the new one. And that dismantling phase feels like frustration. But it's only through that breakdown that breakthroughs occur. If you observe nature, you'll see the same principle at work. The seed must crack open before the plant can grow. The caterpillar must struggle in the cocoon before it becomes a butterfly. That tension, that frustration of resistance, is the force that gives birth to clarity and strength. Human growth follows the same law. You can't skip the frustration phase. It's what prepares you for alignment. When people say they're lost, they're often just in the middle of clarity forming. The frustration they feel isn't a sign to quit. It's a sign that they're shedding what's no longer true. The process feels messy, but that's how understanding deepens. Eventually, after enough cycles of frustration and reflection, a new sense of direction emerges. You stop guessing and start knowing. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop searching outside and begin listening inside. That's when frustration fulfills its purpose. It clears the noise so that clarity can finally be heard. Kishin matters more than perfection. The world is full of people waiting for the perfect time, the perfect plan, the perfect confidence to begin. But the truth is, perfection doesn't exist at the starting line. Waiting for everything to be flawless is another form of fear disguised as preparation. It's the illusion that if we can just plan enough, learn enough, or feel ready enough, we can avoid the discomfort of failure. But life doesn't reward hesitation, it rewards movement. Progress doesn't come from doing things perfectly. It comes from doing things consistently, even when they're messy, uncertain, or incomplete. Perfection is the dream that keeps most people stuck. They spend so much time trying to eliminate mistakes that they forget mistakes are what shape mastery. No one ever learned to walk without falling, yet as adults, we fear falling so much that we never take the first step. We build endless plans, collect information, watch others succeed, and tell ourselves we're getting ready. But preparation without execution becomes procrastination. It feels productive, but it's just another way of staying in your comfort zone. Real growth begins the moment you take action, no matter how unpolished it looks. Action creates clarity, while inaction creates confusion. You can think for months about what might happen, but only by doing do you learn what actually happens. Experience teaches you faster than theory ever could. When you act, you get feedback from the world, from yourself, from results. That feedback helps you adjust, improve, and grow. Perfectionists, on the other hand, stay trapped in their heads. They imagine every possible outcome, every potential failure, until the fear of imperfection paralyzes them. But what they miss is that mistakes aren't the opposite of success. They are the path to it. Every great achievement in history began as an imperfect start. Every artist, entrepreneur, athlete, or leader you admire began with a first attempt that probably wasn't impressive. But they moved. They learned through movement what others only studied through hesitation. Their willingness to begin, to take action despite uncertainty, is what separated them from the rest. The greatest breakthroughs don't happen in moments of inspiration. They happen in moments of decision followed by persistent action. Perfection seduces us because it promises control. It tells us that if we plan enough, we can avoid embarrassment, criticism, or rejection. But that's an illusion. Growth requires exposure. To become skilled, you must be willing to look unskilled for a while. To become confident, you must act before you feel ready. Confidence doesn't precede action, it's built through it. Every small step you take strengthens your belief that you can handle more. That's how progress compounds, not through flawless execution, but through repeated, imperfect effort. The danger of perfectionism is that it shifts your focus from purpose to performance. You start caring more about looking right than doing what's right. You delay opportunities because you're afraid of how they'll appear instead of what they'll teach you. You trade momentum for control. But control doesn't build anything. Courage does. And courage is born in action. The people who move forward in life aren't the ones who get everything right. They're the ones who refuse to let imperfection stop them. Every day, you face two choices: wait for the perfect moment or make this moment enough. The second choice will always take you further. Even the smallest action done today carries more power than the perfect plan postponed for tomorrow. Because every action, however small, builds evidence. It tells your brain, I'm capable. That evidence builds momentum, and momentum builds transformation. The opposite is also true. Every time you delay, you reinforce the belief that you're not ready. You train yourself to hesitate, and hesitation slowly becomes your habit. When you act, you create opportunities that planning alone could never uncover. You meet new people, face new challenges, and discover strengths you didn't know you had. Action expands your world, waiting shrinks it. And even when you fail forward. You gain lessons, resilience, and perspective. Failure through action teaches. Failure through inaction only regrets. That's why imperfect action is always more valuable than perfect intention. If you look closely at progress, it's rarely pretty. It's filled with rough drafts, broken attempts, and awkward beginnings. But those messy efforts are evidence of courage. The people who succeed aren't luckier or smarter. They're simply doers. They understand that waiting for perfection is a trap that kills momentum. They show up anyway. They stumble, learn, adjust, and repeat. Over time, those small, consistent actions carve out a path that perfectionists never start walking. Perfection asks, what if I fail? Action asks, what can I learn? One lives in fear, the other in growth. The truth is, the gap between you and your goals is not perfection. It's movement. Every single step, no matter how small or uncertain, is a declaration that you're choosing progress over paralysis. And when you choose that again and again, your imperfections stop being flaws and start being proof that you're evolving. Because in the end, it's not the perfect plan that changes your life. It's the courage to act before you think you're ready. You said you change first, then your world follows. Most people believe that change works the other way around, that once their circumstances improve, once the right opportunities appear, once others start treating them differently, then life will finally get better. But life doesn't bend to our wishes. It mirrors our mindset. The external world is a reflection of the internal one. When you evolve from within, your beliefs, your attitude, your sense of responsibility, everything around you begins to shift to match that growth. Waiting for the world to change before you do is like staring into a mirror and hoping your reflection will smile first. Real change begins with ownership. The moment you take responsibility for your life, not blame, but responsibility, everything starts moving. When you stop pointing fingers at circumstances, people, or luck, and instead ask, what can I do differently? You reclaim your power. That simple question transforms you from a passive observer into an active creator. Most people spend their lives reacting to what happens. Few decide to become the reason things happen. The difference between the two is internal change. When you change internally, your perception changes, and that alters everything you experience. The same situation that once frustrated you may begin to teach you. The same obstacle that used to drain you may now challenge you. You start noticing opportunities that were always there, but hidden behind the fog of negativity or self-doubt. Your mind becomes the lens through which you see the world, and when you clean that lens, the picture becomes clearer. What once felt like chaos begins to reveal patterns. What once seemed unfair starts to look like training. We often underestimate how much our internal state shapes the external world. Two people can experience the exact same event and walk away with completely different stories. One sees defeat, the other sees direction. The event didn't change. Their interpretation did. And interpretation is the product of mindset. That's why personal growth always precedes life transformation. You can't attract peace from a place of chaos or abundance from a mindset of lack. You can't build healthy relationships if you carry unresolved bitterness. The outside can only rise to the level of your inside. People sometimes say, if I just had more money, more time, more support, I'd finally become who I want to be. But the irony is that when you become who you want to be first, disciplined, grateful, consistent, the money, time, and support begin to follow. Life responds to the energy you bring into it. When you operate from scarcity, you unconsciously repel growth. When you operate from confidence and purpose, you attract it. The world rearranges itself around people who know what they stand for. The process of changing yourself first is rarely glamorous. It happens quietly through discipline and reflection. It means confronting your habits, your beliefs, your self-talk. It means asking hard questions like, am I living by default or by design? It means realizing that complaining changes nothing, but character changes everything. Growth requires honesty, the kind that makes you uncomfortable. Because every internal shift demands that you let go of an old version of yourself. You can't step into your next chapter if you're still defending your last one. You begin to notice how your inner world dictates the energy you carry into every space. When you're grounded, calm, and purposeful, people respond differently to you. Conversations become more constructive, conflicts less reactive. Your environment doesn't magically change, you do. And that internal stability influences the external chaos. You become less controlled by events and more guided by principles. That's the quiet power of inner work. It doesn't shout, but it shapes. Transformation always starts small. You decide to think differently for one day. You choose gratitude instead of complaint. You show patience instead of anger. Those small internal victories accumulate. Over time, they alter the way you speak, act, and react. That's when your world begins to mirror your inner discipline. Opportunities appear not because they were missing before, but because now you're finally able to see and seize them. When you evolve internally, your standards rise. You no longer tolerate what once drained you. You outgrow negativity, procrastination, and victimhood because they no longer align with who you've become. And as your internal world elevates, your external relationships start to shift too. Some people will grow with you, others will drift away. That's natural. The world adjusts to your new vibration. Change within yourself often means losing old versions of your life, but it also means gaining new ones that reflect your growth. Eventually, you start realizing that life isn't about controlling everything outside you. It's about mastering everything inside you. You can't stop challenges from coming, but you can decide how you show up to face them. You can't make everyone like you, but you can stay authentic regardless. That's true power, not the power to manipulate outcomes, but the power to stay grounded no matter the outcome. Once you reach that point, the world no longer feels like it's happening to you. It feels like it's happening through you. So when you want change, real, lasting change, don't start by looking outward. Start by looking inward. The world doesn't need to shift first, you do. Because the moment you rise above old patterns, your reality reorganizes itself to match your new identity. The people, places, and possibilities that align with your growth begin to find you. And that's when life finally begins to transform. Not because everything outside changed, but because you did. Change is never about luck, timing, or circumstance. It's about the moment you finally decide that you've had enough of standing still. Every transformation begins inside you, not around you. Discomfort pushes you to awaken. Decisions give you direction. Frustration sharpens your clarity, action builds your progress, and interchange shapes your reality. That's the real journey, from awareness to ownership, from hesitation to movement, from hoping for change to becoming the change. Nothing in life truly shifts until you do. The world doesn't respond to your wishes, it responds to your standards. And when you finally raise those standards, when you refuse to settle for less than the best version of yourself, life rises to meet you. Because in the end, nothing changes until you've had enough, but once you have, everything does.